Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
All right. Prayers to the tech gods. Let us hope that we can have a snafu-free program this March 24. I intend to attempt to keep my cool throughout. I wouldn't put any major money on whether or not I'm successful, but what the heck? Let's let her go. I am so happy that that wonderful woman who will soon sit on the Supreme Court of this land, unless, of course, Joe Manchin decides otherwise. And there's always a possibility, that one of those Republican women senators might see fit to step up and vote in the affirmative for an obviously qualified candidate for the highest court in the land. I am so happy that her personal humiliation and ordeal is over. Well, they didn't humiliate her. God knows she kept her dignity. But it was a humiliation of our process and our government and what it has become. Jimmy Kimmel had it about right, as they constantly, the Republicans, tried to paint her as some kind of friend of terrorists, pedophiles, and I don't know, murderers of children. Yes, in fact, yes, somebody who, boy, were they playing to the Qanon crowd. I interrupt myself. Wow. Frightening. I mean, they must be aware that they got a whole bunch of voters who buy into that fever dream insanity. Wow. Anyway, Jimmy Kimmel said, it's funny listening to the same people who let the president get away with trying to overthrow the government. Call anybody soft on crime. Yeah, funny. Who's laughing? I had occasion to see Senator Cory Booker, who is on the committee, address Judge Jackson, and whoa, it was wonderful. I was in tears. I don't know how anybody watching it wouldn't be in tears. She was in tears because he spoke to her brother to sister, and with such heartfelt admiration and joy, a word he used on more than one occasion, and uplifted her. And it was extraordinarily moving. And if you didn't happen to see it, I would suggest, if you're in need of a good cry, check it out. Cory Booker yesterday addressing Judge Jackson. Really amazing. The Republicans, I'm frightened. I have to admit, I'm more scared of them than I am of COVID. I'm more scared of them than I am of Vladimir Putin. I continue to calculate in terms of my risk factors that are potentially going to disrupt my life. I calculate the Republicans as the greatest threat to my happiness, to my security, to my country, to the world. And their disgusting display during these hearings and seeing who they are beholden to, the worst of their base. Qanon. Good God in heaven. And then you have, you can't make this stuff up. What a den of thieves and liars. I'm thinking of Mo Brooks, congressman from the great state of Alabama, who had enjoyed the endorsement of the former president, but who had just lost that endorsement by, I don't know what happened to Mo, in a spasm of, I don't know what happened. He told the truth. And that was enough for former president to say, ha! You lost your mind? I withdraw my endorsement. Actually, there's no doubt that Trump withdrew his endorsement because he sees that Mo is a sure loser. And since Trump has an incredible capacity to endorse losers, he decided to at least jettison this one before the fact. But turns out Mo, who was more than happy when he was in the good graces of to spout any lies that would please Der Fuhrer, any ridiculousness. He was there. He was his right hand. He was there January 6th, ramping up the crowds. He was there before Trump spoke, saying, "Are you willing to do what it'll take to fight for America?" He told the crowd that cheered in the affirmative, and then, proved it, attacking the Capitol. So there was Mo, right up front, one of the major congressional instigators for the horror of January 6th. And now he is the first, as far as I know, the first person, right, who was that tight with Trump throughout this attempt to overthrow government, who has said out loud that Trump, in fact, asked him repeatedly to rescind. I guess that was the word Mo said Trump kept using. To rescind the election, which, of course, is not even a constitutional possibility. But since when do constitutional possibilities, enter into the conversation when you're talking about what Donald wants? Rescind. He asked repeatedly as if Mo Brooks could do it. Rescind the election. Get Biden out of that White House. He's telling Brooks, this congressman, to do that. And install me. That's called a coup d'etat. I think Trump told him to hold some kind of a special election. It's called a coup d'etat, a special election that we will rig and make sure that this time I win. And I believe it is the first time that anybody in that tight-knit little crowd that tried to take down the election, the certification thereof, has ever said that was what Trump was asking of people. And that's then the first time that somebody close to him has said that, yes, he was asking us to overthrow the election, hence commit treason. Or if that's too strong, to definitely commit a real serious crime. Now, the question arises, will Mo, now in a fit of pique because Trump dropped him, would he now, since he's told reporters, will he say that under oath to the January 6th committee? Because they have been trying mightily to find somebody in that close proximity, one-on-one, with Donald Trump. Because that is how they will prove that he knowingly was attempting to overthrow the duly elected president, Joe Biden. So, we'll see. You know, Mo Brooks, he is the most vile human being. What did he say? I've got a quote here. Oh, this is, what a scoundrel, what a lying. I'm going to start saying bad words. He said this: I've told President Trump the truth, knowing full well that it might cause him to rescind, there's that word again, to rescind his endorsement. But I took a sworn oath to defend and protect the U.S. Constitution. Oh, yeah. You're doing a hell of a job, too, Mo. And Mo further went on to say, and that is, I honor my oaths. That is the way I am. I break my sworn oath for no man. Oh, yes, you are. You are an exemplar of integrity, Mo Brooks. God almighty. And just staying with on that thing, we have now the release of the resignation letter of one of the prosecutors for the Manhattan district attorney, who had been looking into charging the aforementioned former president with felonies for his, not for his attempts to overthrow an election, but for being a crook. Because when it comes to the Donald, if it's public or private, it doesn't matter. He is not following the rules because they don't apply to him. So one of these two prosecutors who resigned, about a month or two ago? Because the newly installed Manhattan District Attorney has decided to shelve the case that they have been working on, and that the guy who he replaced, Cyrus Vance, had definitely been working on. Priority number one, to charge Donald Trump, businessman, with numerous crimes. And this new DA comes in and says, no. And so the two resign. Now, one of the resignation letters is out. And in it, this prosecutor, whose name is Mark Pomerantz, who, by the way, in his past, has been a person who has defended in court white-collar crooks. He knows a white-collar crook when he sees one. And this is one that he found so despicable that he said, let me at him. I want to work for you guys. Now, I want to prosecute this guy. And so he came into the investigation when Cyrus Vance was the DA, and was one of two people that led it. And he says in his letter that there is no doubt that Donald Trump is guilty of numerous felony violations, and that it is a grave failure of justice not to prosecute him. A few other little items from his letter. The team harbors no doubt about whether he committed crimes. He did. Now, interestingly, initially, the crime that they were going to go after Trump on was called the crime of scheming to defraud, which is something that's Trump's business, right? They're all schemes to defraud, whether you enroll in Trump University, whether you I don't know, whatever he is involved in, it's a fraud. And so one would think that you could rather easily get the guy on scheming to defraud. Specifically, what they were looking at was how he's constantly just making up numbers about his finances, about how rich he is, about what the company holds, the values of property, all that kind of stuff. These numbers have no basis in fact at all. They go up when he wants them to go up. They go down when he needs them to go down. And that was initially what the Manhattan DA was going to go for. But they decided instead to go for something that is more easily provable and is also a flat-out felony. And that is to charge him with falsifying business records. They felt they had pretty much a slam dunk on that. So, as one person put it, so instead of essentially saying that Trump was a liar, which would have been if they went after the first count, they decided to go with, let's go with Trump as a thief. We know he's both. He's a grifter. Been a grifter all his life. Still a grifter. And I mean, the good news is that the New York State Attorney General is going after the grifter in chief for scheming to defraud. Well, I don't know, guys. I just don't know. I don't know what's with. Obviously, my sense is that the new DA, guy named Bragg, feels that it's not a slam dunk. You know, you might know it's true, but proving in court is often a stickier wicket, right? So he just might think, I don't want to take on this. The fact is if they charge him, that would make the first time, right? The first time in the history of this country that American president faces criminal charges. Am I right? I don't know. But the fact that we're told that people who know the law and are experts in white collar crime believe that Trump is a multiple felon in the course of doing his business, the grifting business, that he deserves to be charged, convicted. We'll see. I don't know. Man. Remember hearing somewhere that the wheels of justice are supposed to be swift or something? Aren't they? The wheels of or am I remembering that absolutely upside down? Because, man, they are in need of some oil. God, a slowness. And the system allows for the constant slowing down of efforts to bring to justice criminals with the assets to continue to impede that process, which is, again, Donald Trump's playbook. It looks like the Ukrainians have taken out a Russian ship. That's good. A Russian troop ship. There are pictures of it looking a bit crippled and smoking. Let us hope. With our president over there in, where is he? Brussels? He's over there talking to NATO and the G7 guys and all that. And Zelensky has done another one of his virtual addresses and to NATO. And one of the things he said, which I find just rich, because NATO, as you know, would not deign to allow Ukraine in. Well, there were some geopolitical reasons, knowing it would freak out, you know who. Just the threat of them being in was enough to blah, 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 blah. But one of the reasons NATO gave to Ukraine, well, I'll give you Zelensky's quote. He said to NATO, please never again tell us that our army does not meet NATO standards. Yeah. I'd like to know what NATO country would like to take on the Ukrainians. Huh? They're fierce. They might be small and undermanned and under-equipped, but man, they're fierce. And that's one of the reasons that NATO gave to Zelensky for why they couldn't let him in. I'm sorry, your military is just not up to our levels. Yeah, like Belgium's is. Jesus Christ. Oh. So you got all these diplomats over there in Europe with their heads together trying to figure out how to deal with this madman in Moscow. And that's somebody Madeleine Albright dealt with. And I want to talk about her because, of course, she died yesterday at the age of 84. When she spoke as our Secretary of State to Vladimir Putin, she could speak to him in Russian. Name me another Secretary of State who could do that. She spoke, can't remember how many languages. She spoke a ton of languages. She spoke Russian. And when she first met him, she described him after she met him, and this is what diplomats do, and people in government, if they're doing what they should be doing. And you'll recall the FBI, what was his name, Comey, did. Every time he met with somebody, the minute he got out of the meeting, he scribbled notes of what had occurred. So he always had contemporaneous notes, lest they become important later, which they often do. And after Madeleine Albright, first met Vladimir Putin, in her notes, she described him as small and pale and so cold as to be almost reptilian. Woo! Woo! I think she nailed him. Wow. Almost. Let's get the almost out of there, Madeline, and I think we'll have it about right. A few weeks before she died, as we waited in trepidation for the possibility that Putin would invade Ukraine, Madeleine Albright, dying of cancer, wrote a piece, I believe, for the New York Times. Yeah, for the New York Times. And she flat out predicted exactly what was going to happen. And if only he had read her piece and listened to her wisdom about the mistake he was making. Oh, if only. Because in that piece, she said this. This was published on February 23rd. I believe Putin invaded the next day. She wrote, the last time that her words appeared in, again, contemporaneously appeared in New York Times. Should Putin invade, it will be a historic error. Instead of paving Russia's path to greatness, invading Ukraine would ensure Mr. Putin's infamy by leaving his country diplomatically isolated, check, economically crippled, check, and strategically vulnerable in the face of a stronger, more united Western alliance, check. She saw what a mistake it would be to him. And she couldn't have known about the ferocity, or maybe she would, of the Ukrainian resistance. Maybe she did have a sense of that. Because she was, as I'm sure you know, an emigre herself because of war in Europe. And as a child, she was uprooted from her life in Czechoslovakia, right? Yeah. And her parents, her father was a diplomat. Well, so she comes by it in the blood. And when the Nazis started their adventure, Her father was somebody who was targeted, obviously, for assassination, given his role, and we later learned, given his religion. And he got his wife and children out and got them to London, where in her early childhood, she has memories, much like these Ukrainian children are now going to have for the rest of their lives, of bombs raining down on the shelters that she was in, and of hiding under tables in her home. So, I mean, here's a woman who has had such an appreciation of the human toll of war right there in where this war is taking place. And you know, after the war, her father brought the family back to Czechoslovakia. And then the Russians came. And they took Prague in 1948. And Madeleine Albright's father was again a hunted man and was forced to flee. So the family ran again, and this time made their way to the United States. Now, I remember when she acknowledged that she was a Jew. Although I don't think she ever really embraced that. Something which always left me a little unhappy. But it wasn't until the 1990s when after her tenure as Secretary of State, that the New York Times did a story. And she said that she had suspected. I don't quite understand the suspecting of that you are something that I don't understand her lack of curiosity or wanting or taking. I don't understand it, but then I didn't live it. What happened to her happened to an awful lot of Jews who survived Hitler. Especially the ones that had no choice in the matter, like she, because she was a child. Her parents, escaping, decided, a wrenching decision this would be, to disown their own, create an entirely new identity, because they determined that being a Jew in Europe was too dangerous, and they did not want their children to grow up with that constant threat. And so her parents who both were Jews. They'd been raised as Jews. All they knew was Judaism. They converted to Catholicism Again, not because all of a sudden they believed that Jesus was their Lord and Savior. They did it to save their children, they thought, to protect their children. And then they wanted to make it really clear. They had their children baptized. They went out of their way to be observant Catholics. They observed all the rites and rituals and holidays and went to Mass. They even invented family stories to tell their children. Completely invented new. They had to lose their own parents. Her parents had to deny their own parents, their entire families, their history. And they made up a totally confabulated, well, that's what made up is, history. To create these presumed identities. And Albright, after learning the truth, said, my parents talked about how they met, how they were high school sweethearts. These things are not true. She said they talked about getting ready for various holidays, Easter, for Christmas. They invented stories instead of the stories they held in their own hearts of getting ready for Passover, Hanukkah. And she was a very serious little Catholic girl. And her parents, to their dying day, held to their It's another way, a different way, that Jews were obliterated in World War II. Yeah, the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. Millions upon millions upon millions upon millions upon millions. But then there were Jews like these who escaped physical death, but who killed off their identities. And as I say, it breaks my heart. There are so many like that. So many. Throughout history, many times Jews did this to survive. I mean, you got tons of Jews in the Inquisition, go back to, 1490s, Jews converting to stay alive, but secretly holding on to certain traditions that hundreds of years later, Catholics in Spain or in Mexico or wherever the hell they are don't know why their families have this habit of lighting candles on Friday night. It breaks my heart. And the reality is that after she found out she was a Jew, she also found out that that Jewish family that her parents severed from their lives and her life was pretty much wiped out by Hitler. 3 of her grandparents, 26 other members of the family that didn't get out. And I'm sorry, I don't understand how her parents whose own parents were killed. I can, sorta, but it would not be my choice. My response to the horror, of course, I didn't live it as they did. My response to the horror would be to embrace my Jewishness even more, would be a ferocity, the word for a second time, of claiming that which the Nazis abhorred or feared, or whatever their twisted reasons were. Anyway, Madeleine Albright, wow, what a life. What a life. What a woman. And God bless her. She, by the way, converted to Episcopalian when she married her Episcopalian husband. Oh, God. Anyway. She, in accepting that her parents had done this, said this. She does not have the spin on it that I do. She said, I think my father and mother were the bravest people alive. They dealt with the most difficult decision anyone could make. I am incredibly grateful to them, beyond measure. And give her the last word there. So, as now poor Ukrainians flee for their lives, apparently President Biden is, maybe he already has, I don't know, is going to announce that the United States will accept 100,000 Ukrainians. I don't know how that's going to, really airlift them? I don't know, but that has been reported this morning. And then, speaking of refugees and or people displaced by war, there is this appalling story, which now I can't bring up. Why won't it let me open Reuters? What do you mean? Okay, who cares? I got the headline, that'll have to do. This destroyed city of Mariupol. Again, we learned geography. I never had heard of it. And now I mourn it. A city of about, 400,000 people? Many of whom have been killed, many of whom have fled for their lives, many of whom have been killed while fleeing for their lives, and some of whom, unable to or unwilling to, have stayed in this bombarded, besieged city with no heat, no light. Food. The Russians are corralling the people there, putting them in buses and sending them, confiscating their Ukrainian passports and taking them to Russia. Oh, just regular citizens are being picked up. I guess it's better than being killed, but that's kidnapping, isn't it? What the hell? They're being at gunpoint, put in buses and taken away, as far as we know, not like when the Nazis did it and then you're dead. I don't know. Reuters is reporting up to 15,000 people that the Russians have kidnapped. taken to Russia, which I find just, the horrors don't end, right? I have just a few other things that I want to. Oh yeah, just before I leave the whole horror of Eastern Europe. Also, a note that more reporters and employees who work for the national television networks have followed the lead of that brave woman who held up the sign during the newscast. They have resigned, left their jobs in protest, which, if they don't leave the country, is again a very courageous act. They'll never work again. And who knows what else could happen to them. Obviously, most of these journalists putting out the lies and propaganda from the Kremlin are staying put and continuing to put out these lies. But those that have left, it is said here that there have been at least 4 more high-profile resignations from Russian state television. And one of these people, another woman who was a correspondent, said that even those that are staying, many of them, they are sensing their own guilt. But they feel they have no exit. And she went on to say that asking for people's forgiveness for what we have done is not enough. And she and the others that have know what they've done. They knowingly, what they're saying is that these people at they know they're promulgating absolute lies. And, the story that they're putting out and that most Russians are swallowing is that, we're the good guys, just like when we were fighting the Nazis. And in fact, that's what we're doing again. We're fighting Nazis. And we're liberating these poor people who are under the Nazi boot in Ukraine. And when they show pictures of dead littering the streets in Ukraine, they say to the Russian people that these are people that were killed by the Nazis. That here is one from a recent segment. This was yesterday. They showed carnage, and here's what the reporter said. Local residents say that the Ukrainian military is deliberately shooting at residential buildings. So, like those who watch Fox News here, they're credulous. They believe what they're hearing. Why wouldn't they? Those people look authoritative. They're people you've come to know and trust. And, and the continued sort of aiding and abetting of so many of the Russian talking points by right-wing media here, and Tucker Carlson and Lara Logan, is just, reprehensible. there's some words I'm overusing. I've got to, you know, and you must hear them. I keep doing the same words for this awful stuff that's happening. I'll get out my thesaurus and look for some new words, but they're not the ones that are going to pop into my head, as my head is obviously into, oh God. Oh, remember that splashy book, 60 Minutes, really gave it a wonderful welcome that I went berserk about finding who turned in Anne Frank and her family. That book has now been rescinded. There's the word rescinded again. That's the word of the day. All of the publisher in the Netherlands, because that was the initial publisher, has said it is not publishing the book anymore, is asking for all bookstores who have it to remove it from their shelves, despite the fact that this is a bestseller, The Betrayal of Anne Frank, which fingered a Jew, of course, as the ones who had turned in the Frank family. Well, there was such a hullabaloo caused by historians, people who their entire lives have been dedicated to what happened in the Netherlands. So these are Dutch historians. And they had initially expressed doubts about the book, and then they really got together and really started looking into the book. And these are not necessarily Jews. Raymond Schultz, who's an expert on Dutch notaries during the German occupation, that's his expertise. And the person they said turned in Anne Frank was a Jewish notary. Two experts on the Amsterdam Jewish Council, which he was supposed to be a member of, and other researchers. And they said, we felt we had to step in because we owe it to our discipline. And this, they say, does not hold up in any way. The granddaughter of the man now dead, who's now accused, is begging HarperCollins here, who continues to publish the book, to also cease publication. But HarperCollins is standing by the publication of the book. Poor Anne Frank. There's just so much money to be made when it comes to her. Wow. The Dutch publisher, the original publisher, says, we would once again like to offer our sincere apologies to everyone who has been offended by the contents of this book. And I would hope that 60 Minutes might find its way to an apology as well. Bad chance. All right, and something you didn't know, probably. I read a little piece that made me unhappy. This comes up. The Solomon Islands, nation we don't think about too often, is and always has had a security deal with Australia, because they're in somewhat of the same neighborhood in the Pacific there. And Turns out that the Solomon Islands is about, or close to, finalizing a new security deal in which they are turning their backs on Australia for the security. China has a base warship in the Pacific. And this security deal, which is not a done deal yet, but looking like it's going to be, because the Chinese are sweetening this. Whoa. You know, the Chinese are taking from our playbook. Americans never understood why we were throwing so much money at foreign governments. Why all this foreign aid? Foreign aid. Well, foreign aid buys influence, and foreign aid, buys national security often. And that's what the Chinese are doing here. They want to secure the Pacific as their neighborhood. Now, the Australians are freaking out, and I don't blame them. So I just wanted to have that on your radar, because we don't pay attention to that kind of thing. And if you hear in a year or two about some unhappy incident involving the Chinese, who knows, Taiwan, and who knows, some other, Japan, I don't know. China is flexing its muscles. Well, and you do know that. And the other thing I want to say, and I'm sorry, I'm not leaving enough time for it, is a local story. And I was pleased to see it. Front page Post-Gazette today, and I imagine the Tribune Review, which I haven't seen yet. And that is that that Pittsburgh has, hello, in my photos. I don't want that. Well, God dang it. I'm looking for a thing that I stuck on my photos. There it is. Sorry. I'm sorry. And Pittsburgh has fired. I don't remember this happening very often. Pittsburgh has fired 5 police officers. Fired them. And these are 5 police officers who were involved in the apprehension and killing of an innocent black man named Jim Rogers in Lawrenceville, who they thought, because some helpful racist citizen had called the police to say there was a black guy stealing a bicycle, which was not the case. The bicycle had been put out for, I guess, anyone who wanted it. He was taking it for a little ride to see if he wanted it. The police came, and he was dead soon thereafter. Repeatedly tased, not taken to the hospital in time, dead, just dead. Another dead, innocent, unarmed, black person at the hands of heavily armed cops. There were 8 police involved, I believe, for this horrid crime. Five are now former police, although, of course, they'll appeal and all this kind of stuff goes on. I don't know. And 3 are still employed. But I don't know. Would that have happened if the mayor was named Peduto and not Gainey? I'm just asking. I am asking because it's pretty swift given the way things usually have worked with police misconduct in Pittsburgh. And I'm happy about it. There's some accountability there. Although whether, I'm sure the DA, not surprisingly, is still dithering about whether to prosecute. To get that in. And I think that's it. And since no one emailed me in the course of this show that they couldn't hear it, I am just beyond thrilled. Thank you all. This is it for this week, and I'll be back on Monday. Enjoy this last gasp of early spring, because I guess we're heading back into winter for the weekend, but calendar's on our side. Yeehaw! Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.